For Derek Hill, the morning sun rising over Maple Grove felt different than it had on any other day. It's the golden light that spilled across the rooftops. Usually a reminder of another day in a place that had worn him down, carried with it a sense of finality and freedom. Today was moving day. After 3 long years of enduring whispered complaints, passive-aggressive letters, and the ever-watchful eyes of Karen, the HOA president, Derek was finally leaving. The moving truck was parked along the curb, its back door open wide like a yawning mouth, ready to swallow the last pieces of his life in this neighborhood. For Derek, each box he carried was more than just belongings. It was another step closer to peace. He had moved into Maple Grove with hope. The manicured lawns, tidy sidewalks, and tree-lined streets had seemed like the perfect place to settle down. Derek worked hard, provided for his family, and took pride in maintaining his home. But from the very first week, it became clear that Karen viewed him differently. She scrutinized his every move as though waiting for him to slip up. It started small. A warning about leaving his recycling bin out past 10 a.m., a note about his grass being slightly uneven, another complaint about a visitor parking in the wrong spot. Derek had brushed those off, figuring everyone had. To deal with a strict HOA president, but over time the encounters piled up, and it became clear that Karen had singled him out. Neighbors noticed it too, while others bent rules-leaving basketball hoops in their driveways, hanging wind chimes that clinked late into the night, or hosting loud birthday parties. Karen rarely confronted them. With Derek, however, every minor infraction was treated like a crime against the neighborhood. She hovered near his property on her morning walks, peering at his yard with narrowed eyes. She sent letters filled with cold language about community standards and violation fees. On more than one occasion, Derek caught her taking photos of his house with her phone, claiming it was for documentation. Still, Derek tried to keep the peace. He had seen what could happen when disputes escalated with someone like Karen. She thrived on confrontation, and he refused to give her that satisfaction. He responded politely to her letters, made an effort to comply with the rules, and ignored the more outrageous demands. But it was exhausting. Every interaction chipped away at his sense of belonging. He'd worked hard all his life, put in his years as a city engineer, raised a son he was proud of, and yet here in Maple Grove, he was treated like an intruder. Eventually, the stress outweighed the benefits of the neighborhood. Derek decided it was time to go. Now, as he carried another box down the front steps, he caught sight of Karen out of the corner of his eye. She stood across the street, arms folded tightly, her sharp bob haircut gleaming in the morning sun. She wasn't even trying to hide the fact that she was watching him. Her lips were pursed, her expression sour, as though the very act of his leaving offended her. Derek shook his head and set the box carefully in the truck. He had hoped naively, perhaps, that she would leave him alone on his last day. Clearly, that hope had been misplaced. Within an hour, Karen had marched over. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice carrying across the driveway. "You can't just block the road with that truck. It's against HOA policy." Derek wiped his brow and turned to face her, keeping his tone calm. "The truck is parked legally, Karen. It's not blocking anyone. We made sure to leave plenty of room for cars to pass." Karen sniffed. "Well, it's still unsightly. You should have notified the board before scheduling a move like this." "There are procedures?" "Procedures?" Derek repeated, incredulous. "Karen, I'm moving out." "I don't think the board needs a calendar invite for that." Her eyes narrowed at his tone. "The rules apply to everyone, Derek. Just because you're leaving doesn't mean you're exempt from them." Derek turned back to the house, choosing not to engage further. He had no interest in arguing, but Karen wasn't done. For the next hour, she lingered nearby, making little comments under her breath about how loud the movers were or how the truck was taking too long. When neighbors walked by, she spoke to them in hushed tones, casting suspicious glances at Derek as though trying to turn them against him, even on his way out. Most of them gave polite nods and moved on, clearly uncomfortable. They knew Karen too well to get involved. The final straw came when Derek carried out a box of family photos, carefully wrapped in newspaper. Karen stepped closer, her voice sharp and accusing. "Are you even sure all of this is yours?" Because from the looks of it, you're just shoving furniture and boxes into that truck without any proof. For all I know, you could be taking things that don't belong to you." Derek froze, the weight of her words sinking in. He stared at her, box still in his hands, stunned by the audacity of the accusation. "This is my home, Karen," he said slowly, his voice low. "Everything in this truck belongs to me." Karen crossed her arms, her chin jutting forward. "We'll see about that." And before Derek could respond, she pulled out her phone and dialed. Her voice rose with urgency as she spoke to the dispatcher. "Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious individual. He's loading furniture into a truck, yes, right now. I don't believe he lives here. I think he's stealing." Her words carried across the driveway. It's deliberate and loud enough for Derek to hear every syllable. Neighbors stopped and stared. Some shook their heads, whispering to each other. Others simply walked away, not wanting to be caught in the drama. Derek set the box down in the truck, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a deep, simmering frustration. He had lived through years of Karen's harassment, but this was a new low. To call the police, to frame him as a criminal, while he was moving out of his own home, it was both insulting and dangerous. Minutes later, the wail of sirens broke the quiet morning. A patrol car rolled into Maple Grove, lights flashing. Derek closed his eyes for a brief moment, gathering himself. He had done nothing wrong, and yet he knew how situations like this could spiral. He had to stay calm. He had to be careful. Karen, on the other hand, looked triumphant. She waved eagerly to the officers as they stepped out of the vehicle, pointing dramatically toward Derek. "That's him," she cried. "That's the man I told you about. He doesn't belong here. He's taking furniture out of that house." Derek stood by the moving truck, his arms at his sides, his shoulders straight. He didn't raise his voice or argue. Instead, he waited, because he knew that the truth would reveal itself soon enough. And that, Karen's smug satisfaction, wouldn't last. The officers who stepped out of the squad car were professionals, used to arriving at scenes where tempers ran high and stories conflicted. Still, it didn't take long for them to sense that this call wasn't about a real emergency. One officer, a tall man with a square jaw and calm eyes, scanned the scene. A moving truck parked neatly along the curb, a middle-aged man standing beside it, and a woman practically vibrating with indignation as she pointed at him. "That's him," Karen shouted before they could even approach. Her voice cracked the quiet like glass shattering. "That's the man. He doesn't live here. He's loading stolen property into that truck. You need to do something." The officers exchanged a quick look, one of those silent conversations seasoned cops have when they both realize they're walking into something absurd. Still, procedure demanded they check. The taller officer approached Derek, his hand resting lightly near his belt, but not on his holster. "Sir, can we have a word?" Derek nodded, his expression calm but weary. "Of course, officer. My name is Derek Hill. This is my home I'm moving out today. Can check the lease paperwork or my driver's license. Everything in that truck belongs to me." Behind him, Karen scoffed loudly. "Out. Don't believe a word of it. He's lying. I've lived here for years. I know who belongs and who doesn't. This man has been nothing but trouble for this community." The shorter officer glanced at her, eyebrows raised. "Ma'am, we'll handle the questioning," his tone carried, a firmness that suggested he wasn't impressed with her theatrics. Derek handed over his ID, which showed his address plainly. The taller officer studied it, then glanced at the house, then back at Derek. "All right, Mr. Hill, looks like everything checks out. You're moving today?" "Yes, sir," Derek said evenly, trying to finish before the afternoon. He gestured toward the truck. "These are family belongings. Nothing stolen here." The officer gave a small nod, clearly satisfied. But Karen wasn't ready to surrender her stage. She stormed closer, her finger jabbing the air. "Are you kidding me? He's clearly lying.
A lady.
He's been violating HOA rules since the day he moved. You can't just take his word for it. You need to detain him. Search the truck. Arrest him." The officers exchanged another look, this one tinged with annoyance. They had better things to do than referee an HOA grudge match. A taller one opened his mouth to respond, but just then, Another car pulled up at the end of the street. Out stepped Marcus Hill. Derek's son had grown into a man who carried authority the way some people carried tools naturally, confidently, as if it were an extension of himself. Dressed in plain clothes, but with a certain posture that radiated discipline, he walked toward the group with a purposeful stride. The neighbors who had gathered at a distance murmured quietly, sensing a new shift in the air. "Dad," Marcus called, his voice steady. "Everything all right here?" Derek felt some of the weight on his chest ease. "I'm fine, son," he said. "But Karen here decided to call the police on me for moving out of my own home." Karen turned sharply, her eyes narrowing at Marcus. "And who are you? Another one of his friends trying to cause trouble?" "This is private property," Marcus didn't let her finish. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his badge, flipping it open for the officers and Karen to see. "Detective Marcus Hill, City Police," he said, his tone clipped with authority. He turned to the two officers, who immediately straightened. "Gentlemen," recognition flashed across their faces. "Detective," the taller one said with respect, giving a nod. The color drained from Karen's face as she stumbled back. "Step. Detective," she repeated, her voice suddenly uncertain. Marcus looked at his father, then back at Karen. "So let me get this straight. You called 911, reported a burglary in progress, and accused my father of stealing from his own home while he was moving?" His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. Karen floundered, words spilling out in a jumble. "I didn't know he was your father? I was protecting the neighborhood. How was I supposed to know?" "It looks suspicious." "Suspicious," Marcus repeated, his eyes narrowing. "A moving truck in broad daylight, boxes being carried from a house where he's listed on the lease? That's what you found suspicious?" Her lips parted and closed again, like a fish gasping for air. Around them, neighbors shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Karen and the detective. The silence weighed heavy. Marcus took a step closer, his voice firm. "You filed a false police report, wasted department resources, and attempted to criminalize an innocent man. That's harassment. And since you made that call deliberately, knowing he lived here," he let the weight of his words hang for a moment. "That's a crime." Karen's composure cracked. "Why do you can't possibly mean you're going to arrest me?" "I was just mistaken." The taller officer spoke up then, his voice cool. "Ma'am, Detective Hill is correct. Filing a false report is a misdemeanor at best, a felony at worst, depending on the circumstances. You accused a homeowner of burglary in his own residence. That's serious." Marcus pulled out his radio, speaking with the practiced ease of someone used to giving orders. "Control, this is Hill. I need a unit at Maple Grove Estates for a 10-92 false report. Suspect in custody." His words were calm, professional, but his eyes never left Karen's. Karen's jaw dropped. "Custody? You can't. This is outrageous." "I'm the HOA president." Marcus arched an eyebrow. "That makes you what above the law? You think your title gives you the right to weaponize 911 against people you don't like?" He shook his head. "Not today." The two uniformed officers moved forward, one gently but firmly taking Karen by the arm. She sputtered, her voice rising in pitch. "This is ridiculous. You're making a mistake. I was only trying to keep the neighborhood safe by calling in a fake burglary on a man moving out of his own house." The shorter officer said dryly, "Doesn't sound like safety to me, ma'am." Neighbors began recording on their phones, some whispering to one another, others smiling faintly at the spectacle. For years, Karen had ruled Maple Grove with intimidation, her clipboard and sharp tongue silencing anyone who dared cross her. Now, with her wrists being cuffed, she looked small, her authority crumbling in the face of real power. Derek stood quietly by the truck, watching. He didn't gloat, though a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Seeing her humiliated, it was relief. Relief that for once, the harassment had consequences. Relief that his son had stepped in, not only his family but his justice. When Karen was finally led toward the patrol car, still ranting about her rights and her position, Marcus turned to his father. His expression softened. "You okay, Dad?" Derek nodded slowly. "I am now." He clapped his son on the shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. Didn't think my moving day would turn into this, though. Marcus gave a small laugh. She picked the wrong family to mess with. Let's finish this move. You've got better places waiting for you. As the patrol car pulled away with Karen inside, neighbors waved to Derek, some offering quiet words of support. Others simply looked relieved, as though a weight had been lifted from the entire community. For years, Karen had bullied and berated, but her downfall had come at the hands of her own arrogance. From that day on, Maple Grove was different. People remembered the sight of Karen being driven away in the back of a police car, her shouts echoing down the street. They remembered that she had tried to criminalize a man for moving out, and that his son with a badge and authority had turned the tables. And for Derek, every mile the moving truck carried him away felt lighter. He was free.